I do not believe in the creed professed by the Jewish Church, by the Roman Church, by the Greek Church, by the Turkish Church, by the Protestant Church, or by any church that I know of. My mind is my own church. All national institutions of churches, whether Jewish, Christian, or Turkish, appeared to me no other than human inventions set up to terrify and enslave mankind and monopolize power and profit. Thomas Paine, The Age of Reason. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today's special guest is Connor Dahlin, CG Dahlin. His YouTube description is in the description box. I think I may have to re-edit that just because I had to do a reboot. Anyways, today we're just going to have a conversation a little bit less generic, but it may expand to just different segues because, I mean, so many things just interrelate. So it'll be on Deism and on Symbolism. So welcome back, Connor. How have you been?
It's a pleasure to be here. Pleasure to dig into the topic a little bit so that we could have some extra to talk about.
Thank you. So what have you been doing recently since our last conversation? I've seen your videos. I think you did 2 videos.
Yeah, I do one a week. So death goddesses and gods of all religions across the world and history, and then how ancient Sumerian mythology, pantheism relates through Babylon to the Old Testament and the Bible. And then this week I've been studying astrotheology and how all the stars, how an interpretation of astrology can be used to better understand the esoteric writings of the Bible, both in Revelations and in Old Testament. Oftentimes kind of people don't understand what they're reading right in front of them. So it's more of a way of interpreting the esoteric side of the Bible as opposed to the exoteric understanding of it. So that's been taking up a wormhole in my mind for a while now. I did it once before in interpreting all the strange chimeric angels of Ezekiel. That was one of my first videos. So how can you understand these things symbolically using astrological systems as opposed to, whatever.
I think what might be tough with that is because since it deals with astrology or astrotheology, it deals with the patterns of the stars, constellations, however you want to put it. Now that's what we would call universal. Any time period, any location, they'll see the same constellations as in a different time, different place, if that constellation appears. So how is that? Do you move it on towards like a previous religion or civilization that may have started it, but then does it get evolved or
this is where
adopted?
A lot of question marks come in because you have universal tropes across the world, for instance, that focus around the Pleiades. And they all have similar understandings. It's all 7 sisters or 6 sisters in one hides, or it's all doves or chickens or hens. And all around the world, no matter where we're talking, they all have the same mythos, whether we're talking the interpretation of the Pleiades via the Greeks or via the Native Americans. And they shouldn't have the same stories if we conventional history. So one of 2 options there. Either they all originate from one understanding, and then you have to get into like Atlantis and Lemuria and all that sort of stuff, or they all come to the same conclusions independently, and for whatever reasons they all believe that this particular cluster in the sky is worthy of nobility or notoriety independently. And both of those assumptions are hard to understand in full
Yeah.
based off what we know. But it's weird that there are certain fixations. There's a lot of stars in the sky, but for whatever reason, ubiquitously across the cultures, there are certain ones that are mythologized or fixated upon.
And one of the ones that I came across early in all my research was just the swastika. And the thing about the swastika is it goes back thousands of years across different civilizations and cultures, and they all meant the same thing in each of these cultures. Until, of course, the Nazis used it, and then theirs was still the same thing, except it was propagandized as being an evil sign associated with the Nazis, except it was always associated with trying to be lucky, having positive energies towards you rather than negative. Of course, there's the reverse direction of the swastika, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, if we're going to talk about symbolism, then something to get out of the way right away is not what it means in itself, but what people do with the symbol is the big thing. So people forget about what it meant because of what people do with it. For instance, we could use the swastika as a very recognizable symbol, but pre-Christianity, the cross had a circle around it and was the astrological symbol for the sun. So there's always this story of what did it originally mean and how has it been co-opted by other cultures, by other understandings. So there's always not what meaning is in it, but what meaning do we bring to the symbol is an interesting implication. The swastika, from what I looked into in Mithraism, as it spread throughout Eastern Asia, all the way up to Mongolia, I believe, originated, and I'm not claiming this is 100% truth, but there was an idea that the center of the swastika was the pole star or the axis point of the northern, Earth, and the stars that go out from it is the swastika. So it's actually a astronomical observation or an astrological influence, and that was the original choice of it. But yes, you're right in stating that it's been used across many different cultures across the world. And I think you even see transcriptions of something to its nearness in Mesoamerica and the Aztecs as well. Which where did everybody get this idea?
Yeah.
There's that same question again.
And I think the astrotheology makes sense in the interpretation of these symbols, because I've always been thinking about, all right, say if someone took a psychedelic drug and went somewhere and wanted to bring something back to explain to everyone, and then maybe different people across different regions came back with the same thing, the same idea, and they took a snapshot of it, except a symbol. I mean, imagine just even in a 2-hour movie, you just want to take one picture of that movie to symbolize the entire movie, and so it's very difficult to get like a great amount of meaning off of just that one snapshot over just millions of parts of the same snapshot over 2 hours, etc. So now when we go with astrotheology, where they could just look into the night sky and it doesn't change, and then you can interpret a whole bunch of meaning into just the symbolism they see in the sky. And so I think that's a great topic. I'm looking forward to listening to you on that one. But then, okay, so if we see the symbolism of the cross for Christianity, and then we've got the Muslim symbolism of the moon and the a moon and a star, isn't it?
Yeah, I believe so.
And then the Jewish symbolism is the Eye of Hamsa. Um, what are your thoughts of the Eye of Hamsa? Is that something that's astrotheological or something else?
Are you talking about the
Like the eye in the middle of the hand, that symbol,
oh um
because that's supposed to be warding off of evil, the evil eye.
yeah, and that reverberated all the way to Greece and beyond as well, right?
Mhm.
That's a tricky subject to bring up because then we have to talk about, well, what is the evil eye to begin with? The idea that one could that bleeds back into all the way into shamanic roots, that one could steal a portion of another's soul through the act of the evil eye, which is something that people just don't talk about that anymore. It's curious. I have experienced people. There's some shamanic communities around here, and through testimony, I've seen that people have claimed that this has been done to them, and there's a number of incantations and things to do in order to retrieve your soul. But then again, I'm jumping straight to shamanism in that category, because if a fire burns you and you're traumatized, technically the fire takes on a part of your soul, but it can intentionally be done by a person to you if they wish to do you harm. Um, but that I don't know where exactly it would have. Maybe it did originate in. I haven't got to look into that one at length as much, but maybe it did originate in the Middle East. I was more caught up on the Star of David. That's what I thought you were going with on
Yeah,
that
I
one.
mean it's utilized in Captain America in some ways.
And that a bottomless pit when you look into it. Um, there's a lot of really heady conspiratorial types that will point to the southern pole of Saturn, how there is this uh, is it? It's not. Yeah, it's a hexagon, or is it a
Yeah,
pentagon? It's a hexagon.
hexagon.
Yeah, at the bottom of the world, that is anomalous. Like, why does it look like that? And then you have to think, well, what does Saturn represent astrotheologically? Saturn, Satan, the antagonist to the sun being on the other side of the earth, how they revolve around each other, right? In the geocentric models of the past, um, how many ways that star has been used, um, the the Star of David in all of its depictions across different cultures representing different things. What's up with the numerological equivalent of the number 6? All these conspiratorial types pointing to, isn't 6 supposed to be the bad number? Look at all the angles. They're 60s, they're 60s, they're 60s. That's the satanic, but they're still, they call the Star of David, whatever. It's that is an instance of a symbol that has been hypercharged, where
Hmm.
people keep throwing different things into it. And I'm not here to argue that there might that we might all be missing the mark of what it was originally intended to be. The numerological understanding of 6 is not demonic by any means. It's actually a unification number. It's actually a number of compassion. But if you say 666, then you're talking about the mark of the beast, and
Yeah.
that's bad news.
Now, I always thought of it as I'm not sure if I did a video. I might have, but if we think about it in mathematics and alchemical transformations, maybe, right? So if you divide 100 by 3, you're going to put 33.3, 33.3, and then one of them has to be 33.4. But if we want to put a constant as what 1/3 means in decimal point, most people would put 33.3. But if you add up 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3, it'll equal 3/3, makes a whole. But if you add up point or 33.3, 33.3, 33.3, it adds up to 99.9. So where does that point one ever come from? So there's always that one, some alchemical transformation occurs somehow to make it a whole. And so
Mhm.
I mean, it could be interpreted as just like the eye symbolism over the all-seeing eye over the incomplete pyramid type of thing. But the thing is, most of the symbolism that we learn about is always given to us by others, by whether it's going to be the like the profane, or just the one that's
It's a
given out to the
telephone
masses.
game.
Mm-hmm.
It loses over time. You could understand what this is what this symbol means, okay, flat out face value. But then what you lose is why it means that, and then you lose its originating cause, its originating meaning, explanation behind that meaning, I should say. And then you go through entropy, multiple iterations, bam, 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 and then you're so far out in abstraction from what was originally intended by it. And now you have what is equivalent to a corporation or a husk that everybody can just throw whatever they want into it. And they're like, yeah. So sprinkle some of this in too. The question of it is also strangely linguistic as well, because in the same way as certain words gain notoriety, get bad associations, get thrown into the dumpster, even though they didn't originally mean such things to begin with. So not just in symbols, but also in words, they both kind of play together in that way because they're vessels for meaning. A great example would be the word nymph. Nymph being a semi-divine being in original terms, water deities, and then look how it turned into nympho. You're a nympho, and that's like a harlot, like a overly promiscuous woman. Like, what happened there?
Yeah.
Look what they've done with the word. It seems like a bit of a tangent, but it's all relevant. What we charge it with.
I mean, we different esoterists, they talk about how words, are spelling, a spell. Just so I can understand that. Same thing with other languages. Sometimes the symbol, or the letter in itself, is the symbol for something. Just like most of the Asian alphabets, Chinese, sometimes some of them Korean, Japanese. They're not necessarily like the Latin English type of association with the word, but the actual letter itself is more symbolic to what it's trying to represent in nature, as opposed to the way that we structure grammar in the, I don't know, Indo-European type of language.
Yeah, you find that in Nordic with their runes.
Runes, yeah.
And then you find that in somewhat in a roundabout way in gematria in Hebrew. How they all correlate to numbers, and they also have interior meanings. You find that on tarot decks, that this archetype is equivalent to this letter in the Hebrew alphabet. So there's some weird DJ remixes on Western languages when it comes to that, how the letters include that symbolism. And then you get lost in abstraction when it comes to, say, the English alphabet, like what meaning is there to T, or K, like it's lost versus, hieroglyphics.
One thing we haven't really touched upon is Deism. That I want to get into, and a lot of that has to do with just kind of my research into Adam Weishaupt. And with Adam Weishaupt, a lot of conspiracy theories, and I think a lot of these either governmental driven, CIA, etc., or religiously driven, because we see a lot of opposition to Deism within governments, institutions, universities, even governments. And I think when I researched Adam Weishaupt a lot more, so he's the founder of Bavarian Illuminati, not just Illuminati. It's just like Bavaria. Bavaria didn't found cream. They found specific version of cream called Bavarian cream. So the term Illuminati, as far as I looked into, originated somewhere maybe in Spain, as far as like the written history goes, called the Alumbrados, which means Illuminati. So the Spanish historian in the early 19th century traced that all the way back to the Gnostic Christianity, and that's usually around like the 2nd century AD. But it could go even further before, and then so that was around 1492, the Alumbrados, and that's where the Society of Jesus Jesuits had the well, all about the Inquisition and then the Spanish Inquisition. So they're the early ones that were interrogated by the Inquisition. And then in France, around 2 times during the 1700s, there's a term for Illuminati in French that came about, and they died down. And finally, in Bavaria, in Germany, which Adam Weishaupt says, that's Deism came into Bavaria. He didn't bring it to Bavaria; it was already there. And so, in around 1776, because it's the same year as the United States forming the Constitution, he finds the Bavarian Illuminati, and then a year later, he joins the Freemasons, the Masonic Temple. Gets initiated and uses that as a platform to have them join his Bavarian Illuminati. And then a Freemason joins in 1780. They gain a rift, and about 2 to 3 years later, I think, he has to shut down the Bavarian Illuminati. He gets fired from his university of teaching canon law, and gets exiled. And so he writes for 2 years, trying to explain what he was doing with the Bavarian Illuminati. Then the rest of his life, he just writes philosophical stuff. And so everyone seems to get him wrong, and he gets attacked by so many people who are either Jesuits, even Protestants, and the like. And then the 2 people who supported him, and you can see them in letters. You can even look at a .gov site. It's Thomas Jefferson and Bishop James Madison, not the president, but the cousin of the President James Madison. And they're like, yeah, this guy's great, right? I basically knew about him because Bereal and Robeson, they were like saying bad things about him. And then it's like, well, those quotes, I actually like them, and I really don't like Bereal. I don't like Robeson. So they're just writing about how they're kind of in line with Weishaupt, and if he was in the U.S., he wouldn't even need to keep it a secret. The reason he kept it a secret, they understood, was just the government and the religious control over in Germany and Europe at that time. So yeah, it makes sense to keep it secret. Unlike the Freemasons, which didn't have to be a secret society in the United States because they're free to do what they want. So it didn't matter. There's no real need to have any secrecy in the United States at that time because, well, they're okay with letting anything happen. So that's kind of how I got into Deism. And then, I learned more about Thomas. So all these antagonists against Weishaupt, and eventually I learned about Thomas Paine. And Thomas Paine is the founder of the U.S., helped write the Constitution. He was just considered the main person who pretty much started the revolution against Britain because just his pamphlets on common sense. And George Washington even had his soldiers read Common Sense, and they just to get them motivated for battle against the British. Fast forward that to sorry, I'm talking a lot. Around 17, I think the 1780s, around there, he goes back to France, help with the revolution. Maximilian Robespierre, who is helping lead the revolution, um, finally takes over. Gets there's an age of terror. He gets the king of France at that time and wants to behead him. And of course, Thomas Paine is saying, "No, don't behead him. Have him alive." And he gets jailed by Robespierre, and fortunately, he survives the death penalty. And Robespierre gets assassinated, guillotined, and then he's asking for help at that time. Thomas Paine. George Washington doesn't help him. He's basically betrayed because he wrote something called I can't remember what it was called, but it was before the Age of Reason. But basically, they like, I gotta disassociate from you just because the stuff that you write about. And then eventually, Thomas Jefferson, when he becomes president, he finds a way to pardon him and bring him back to the U.S. Because I think, yeah. And so by the time Thomas Paine dies, he only has like 6 people at his funeral. He's broke because since he was born in England, all of his assets were there. They seized all of his assets, and so he's no money. He lived in the U.S. Nobody liked him except for a few people. Everyone considered him a betrayer of Christianity and the founding of the United States. A lot of Christians, but Benjamin Franklin was saying in a letter to him, don't publish the Age of Reason. All these thoughts, it's good to keep yourself, but these people aren't ready for this, because imagine their behavior if there wasn't like Christianity to actually guide them, morally. They couldn't find their morality without it. So it was kind of ironic they call it the Age of Reason, and it was almost anything but. And that was just kind of my foray into deism, and I think that was more exciting than anything I had to deal with at like public school. So I mean, there's probably a lot that you could talk about with deism, and for me, it just seems very similar to Taoism in many ways, and in certain aspects, Gnosticism. And I was just wondering if you might have had any not synchronicities, but like similar outcomes of thought, maybe different, but I don't want to have
So
you think my way. I want you to.
it's curious, the dissension between the orders, right? Because it shows a fundamental disagreement. They can agree on a lot of the initiations and what this means and what this means, but then it might get to the point, well, ultimately, what is it about? Ultimately, what is the thing? And is it a blind faith in a kind of well trodden upon idea of God, or is it something that is a different idea of God that takes on a very different definition or understanding, right? And at that fundamental base, that's where you can see this kind of cracking. And then, modern day Freemasonry, people would question that they're fundamentally atheistic, or they're fundamentally worshippers of the Canaanite polytheism or whatever, So there's always those questions of what's really going, like you noted, but didn't state outright. The United States leaders, all the leaders were Masons. They all were Masons. You can look up pictures of the old George Washington and all of his, memorabilia, his garb and all that. And that was one of the prime motivators behind secession from, seceding from Britain, was this aspect of thought.
Well, I wouldn't say all of them, just a few of them. Eventually,
yes,
there's a lot of
that's a bit
opposition.
of an overstatement, but there that definitely was a driving factor of the mix that was in the mix, along with rebel rousing and maybe some pent-up aggressions. But gosh, there's a few notes I wanted to touch on. The beginning of the use Illuminati or illuminated ones. That's a super convoluted history right there. Because what do you mean by illuminated? Illum goes back to El, which goes back to Canaanite, which goes back to Anu in Sumerian, which is a sky deity. So what are we talking about here? You know, what does it mean to be Anu or Ilum? Um, does it mean seeing a certain fundamental truth of the universe? If so, what does that mean? And obviously, they have disagreed on what this illumin is. You know, oh, I've been illuminated. I think this, but that guy over there also says he is, but he thinks that. So, what is it that we're talking about here? But yes, there is a interesting battle between deism, I suppose, is a way of putting it, and what the state or what government subliminally wants to push on people, right? Since in the earliest times of human civilization, religion and law were one. The government was an extension of religion. Morals and laws were dictated by scripture and so forth. Back to Hammurabi, all the way forward to, maybe 400 years ago. But since then, now it's the age of reason, right? And that's become the new dogma that the government's put forward, which is strangely atheistic. Yeah, not even agnostic, just atheistic.
Yeah, really trying to be very secular. Another term for it.
Yeah, but it's not even, because secular would encourage the study of several things.
Mm-hmm.
There's no encouragement. It's null.
Yeah.
It's like a static pond.
The thing is, you're seeing the same thing, and that's like my next big research is governments are very supportive of, atheism. The Pope is very supportive of atheism, but once you get into something like deism or anything like similar than just believing in nothing, then they're just very much opposed, and I just think that's just very peculiar, and
Yeah.
I'm just always wondering why. So I would.
Yeah. I mean, if I go out and I say I fundamentally, the God is here, God is looking, God is judging, people don't like that. It makes them feel itchy. They don't like to sit around that because they don't want to have to entertain that level of introspection. Not to mention, God is a tremendous symbol, tremendous word, hypercharged by all sorts of convoluted ideas that people throw into it. One person's God is hateful. Another person's God is literally like birds, whatever. It could be anything. And that's the trick of going to church in the first place, because what does the preacher mean when he says God? Is it the God that hates homosexuals? Is it, am I agreeing to that God by listening to this? Kind of, I think with how much wrong people were bringing to it, it kind of imploded in on itself. And now it's a kind of ancestral trauma and a kind of cultural taboo because of what was done with it. Not what it is, but because of what was done. So I think it's reasonable, although I'm willing to hear out any like more sinister intentions to, shooing away the Godhead or the idea of divinity. But I think that it really just has to do with people just went too hard. They went too hard on it, man.
What I find a lot is just the inversion of things, particular things that are good to being the opposite, and we touched upon that earlier in our conversation. I was just wondering, do you think that's on purpose? I think it is, but just want to know your opinion on that.
I really have a theme of like making things flat again. When you are wrong and you realize you've done something wrong, what would be reasonable for you to do is to make a half measure, because you understand there's a balance here. But what everybody does culturally and individually is when we realize that we're wrong and we're too far out of balance, we jump to the opposite end. We don't make a measured, I'll just switch it a little bit. We jump. and we operate on opposite poles. So we were too far in this category. Oh, we're wrong. Huh, flat on over. Where really it's this minutia, this tedium of the middle way. Buddhist reference for you there.
Yeah.
And how we reach that is by understanding both oppositions. We have to live both sides. So there is a cycle to these things that is natural and necessitated. So we have to learn all that's wrong over here. Then we have to learn all that's wrong over here. And then we can finally start to wiggle around that sweet spot. Now, individually speaking, we do this like an infinite amount of times in life. Everybody can relate to this. And then on the collective consciousness scale, these are big implications, big sways of contemporary influences, indoctrinations, so forth.
Do you think that's where the yin yang symbol and the Ouroboros stem from?
Yeah, and something that I want to talk about here, because the greater idea is that there is always going to be a shifting, that we're always going to change our allegiances and what we think. And so if we're thinking big time here, then it's not about the truth of right now. It's about the truth as it changes throughout time. And so that's the big question. And that's yin yang, that's Ouroboros, that's what those symbols can symbolize. But certain truths, that means that we have to accept certain things that we find fundamentally true in our own investigations now will be wrong. And that the truth isn't objective, it changes. Which, if you want to get all simulation theory and whatnot, it's like as soon as you figure it out, the code changes. Yep. As soon as you reach a certain level of advancement, new stage. And that's the elusive mind of the collective. Yeah, there's a lot to unravel on that one.
Yeah.
I want to say something real quick, just as a throw-in. So in the Old Testament, God in the truth of things was very Aries, and that was happening in the age of Aries. God was vindictive and trying to murk civilizations, rip down sacred groves. Very Aryan, very warrior centric. And then you jump to the age of Pisces, and now God is forgiving and kind. And, everybody, I love you, right? That's very Piscean.
Yeah.
And so it's as if God is a representation of what they would call the solar logos. God changes its aspect by the ruling host of the age. So Aries to Pisces, and then the new changing God would be the subsequent Aquarius form that changes in time. The solar logos changes its message. But that's getting into a level of esotericism that requires more than just this talk.
Getting back into deism.
Yeah, sorry.
No, that's right. I like where it goes because I find it's just like the idea of deism also is just don't let your mind be funneled into one way of thinking. That's where just free thought. The free thinkers are kind of like the precursor to deists. The main thing that people try to point out with deism is that they believe in a god, some godhead, Tao, source, whatever, creator, except that the deists believe that it's not, whatever that is, it's not participating in what we say things happen here. That's probably the only thing I would disagree with. I mean, it may be what deists think, but that's not what even though I agree with a lot of things that deists would support, but from my experiences, I wouldn't agree with that. Not that it would be, I don't know. But it's definitely not like the Abrahamic religions where they have a deep, they're just elbows deep into just the going ons of us. It just feels more subtle in some ways that it's difficult to explain. And I think, I don't know, your
I
take on it
think
would
a
be
good
great.
precursor to all of this is Ralph Waldo Emerson and his context or his idea of the oversoul, and how it's kind of an accumulation of the collective consciousness. And that's what you can liken. It's a much more subtle form of God, as opposed to something that is ruling, not even aristocratic, like tyrannical potentially, enforcive. In looking in the deists, it seemed, there was quite a disagreement among them. The conversation kept changing, which, look at any philosophical tradition, and that's always what happens, is that conversation keeps changing. New iterations of these ideas keep coming out. So we're really looking at a smorgasbord here. We're not looking at one central idea of what deism is, other than, does divinity exist? Is there something beyond? Which I want to approach that one, right? Is there an unknown? Or how about this? I guess the argument is more, is there something that's consciously involved in the mechanisms of reality, right? And that's, it's a real wormhole, because in that way, you're God.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. And it's really a question that comes up based off of your cultural background. If you are a Hindu, then it's Brahman, and it shattered itself, and everybody is the Godhead infraction. If it is a very bland, categorical Christianity, then you are made in the image, and you're nothing more than a reflection of that, always falling short of that. Those are two very different emotional things. To the Brahmin people, this would mean that the divinity includes them. And to the bland Christian people, this would mean that the divinity is always outside of them, something to be sought, which leads to guilt, which leads to reaching, which leads to all sorts of chronic emotional states that are mostly negative. And so I think what's most important here is to notice what emotional when it all spells out, what does it emotionally do for the person, that belief? Mm-hmm. Does divinity mean that you feel more whole, that you feel cared for, that you feel backed up, and that whatever your conception of God is something that you trust and helps make you feel fulfilled? No matter what form that takes, good on you. If it takes another form where it makes you self-righteous, you can do anything that you care to do, you can just shit all over the world because it's all about you, right? And whatever arbitrary things that you find wrong, bad on you. It doesn't matter what your philosophical backing is or what book you point at. Now that's a bit of a rant for you. I think that it's fair to say, and you know me, I don't like to step out on, I don't like to stick my neck out, but I think it's completely just for anyone to say there are unknowns. I think everybody should say that. There's a lot of unknown. We are in a swamp of unknown. And so it's something that you said earlier too. It's when people become too convinced. That's the problem, that they know with a capital K. And that turns them into fundamentalists. That turns them into self-righteous, no matter what religion we're talking about. And that makes them a terror to everybody around them. But if you're like the Tao, right, then you're open, suggestible. I make no assumptions about what it is. I just go with it. I'm open to suggestion. I'm open to being shown something different. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there.
And that reflects our personalities. I mean, basically, it's just a personality trait that you want to pick up. Just like someone who's very relaxed, Taoist, whatever. They don't care what you think. They see how you act some way, and they don't really judge. But they may, if they were asked upon, or someone from a very authoritarian, strict, it's like, don't question me, don't question God, don't question science, don't question.
It's a
And then
fragile ego
yeah,
right there.
and then like everyone around that person doesn't want to step on their toes. They may even avoid them, but sometimes they can't because they just start, they go everywhere and they tell people this and that, and if it's just very.
I am so humble. I am so kind.
Yeah, I mean, if you are, you really don't need to say all those things.
Yep.
Um, it's
And they're using it. That's the thing.
mhm.
They're using it to justify their own aims, and the motivation is self-aggrandization, to make themselves better or bigger. That's what ruins it.
Yeah.
And that is like you said, it's personal. The person. And we think that we're just talking about the objective world. But what seems most important here is who is the one talking? Who is the one thinking about this? I look at, like I noted before, I would look at the southern pole of Saturn, and in me, I feel wonderment. That's a very curious thing, and if anything, that would give me an excitement, and I don't hope to designate it as anything, right? And then you have the woke culture of people, woke conspiratorial sorts that will look at it and like, here is yet another reason why we are being damned by the elites. They've worked out the matrix, man, and here they want to see yet another thing that makes them a victim. What does that say about you? What does that say about what you're doing with it? When I was reading into astrotheology, I was going through this whole thing, all these interesting notes, and out of all this guy takes Revelations and he says, in conclusion, Barack Hussein Obama is the Antichrist. And it's like, dude, really? That was your motivation for all of this? It's what you want to see out of it. That's the important thing. It's highly subjective. And we don't like to hear that because we want to think that something external to us, whether it be a God, a lover, a job, whatever, is going to come in and make me feel okay. And really, right, it's a me thing. It's not the world thing. It's what how I look at it. And that has everything to do with deism. That has everything to do with symbolism. It has everything to do with words. It has everything to do with literally everything.
Yeah, I mean, that's why it's all interconnected, which is difficult when we have to stick to a topic, right?
It's really hard to stay on track.
Yeah. For me, I just came to the realization is I think it's like, for me, my standpoint would be it's about freedom. And the end of it all is to see how much of your freedom do you give away at the end. It's like everyone thinks we're not free. The thing is, you can still do whatever you want. There may be consequences for it, but there's no one telling you to do. It's like not a direct slave ownership. It's very subtle. It's like, you should do this. If not, you're going to be audited. If not, you're going to be forced to pay. If not, you're going to have lawyers and police officers come. If not, there's going to be judge ruling. If not, all these things. And then you're like, wait, so who gives them the authority? Who prints all the money? So, it's all about freedom and how much you give into it. The more you give into it, the less freedom you have, and you realize you're not free. But if you're at the mindset that you're always free, well, these forces are going to put their boot all over you, etc. But the thing is, if you don't oppose them, then they'll readily put their boot all over you because they realize, well, you're already part of our system. It's like, we know you're not going to do anything. But so I mean, it's just like so many quotes from like the revolutionists and stuff like that is like, look, if you just remain silent, Edmund Burke even said it in evil triumphs when good men do nothing type of thing. So it's just kind of like standing by, um, letting it happen. Was that other quote like they came for the socialists and I did nothing. Then they came for the Jews and I did nothing, and then they finally came for me, type of thing. I mean, that trope is everywhere, and yet to this day, people are still doing the same thing. It's like all this corruption that they see, and you talk about government, you talk about police, you talk about certain religions, and talk about like the banking industry and Wall Street. They say there's just corruption everywhere, and then if you really talk to them about it, and then they'll say, there's nothing I can do about it. It's like they relinquish their power, their freedom to realize, that whatever they do, nothing's gonna happen. It's like that may be true, but if I actually do nothing, then you really can't do anything about it. So
there are many ways to approach this, but there are two fundamental reactions. You can laugh or you can cry.
Yeah.
And again, that's how you choose to look at it. So I definitely am not one to say that I haven't felt the weight of all this, right? I've become very, very aware, probably too early. And, it's easy to become a cynic, and it's easy to become a nihilist. But, that you've reached somewhere. And this might make me to seem like I'm a defeatist, but something very corrupt is exposed. And then there's a part of me, I'm enjoying it, I'm reveling in it, because it's not that I ever hoped, because what it really comes down to is that you see all these things and somehow you think that you should be in charge of it and what it should do. If only it was up to me, which is what everybody else is doing and why it's going so wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so laugh at it instead, don't play ball. Does it involve you? And I think we were talking about this roundabout last time too, I'm here for a blip. I'm just here to check things out and check out, And so in that way, is this really that serious? Do I really think it's that serious? That's a classic Alan Watts approach, Is it serious? Is this really something I should get bent up about, right? Because these people over here are doing something messed up. And yeah, it does implicate me by circumstance. But do I have any control over them? No. Should I force control over them? How's that going to turn out?
Yeah.
Right? And so, all right, I'm over here. I'm not going to let that affect me for what I can. All right, ideal, perfect. Do what you can, You don't perpetuate what's going on. You do what you can to not perpetuate what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
You don't feed it.
Yeah.
Because it's true, like you're saying, if something was ideal or how we want things to be, right? Then the idea of, say, something like money. If everybody tomorrow suddenly didn't believe in money anymore, it's gone. It's gone. It's not a thing.
Mm-hmm.
If we just didn't believe in it, we mentally didn't ascribe any value to paper that's green, it's gone. Yes. Do I glorify money? This is how I would perpetuate it. Do I glorify it? If only I had more, then I could be successful. I could have a 401k, and blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
If I glorify it, then I'm perpetuating it. But if I don't speak on it, right, I reserve myself, that's the most I can do. So it's very subtle. You have to play a subtle game. And it's not being an antagonist, because if you're antagonized away from it, then you are perpetuating the loop,
Mm-hmm.
You are creating that duality. And the funny thing to realize about that is, if the world wasn't so corrupt, then you couldn't have people who are so woke. You don't exist without that corruption. That corruption makes you who you are, because this is the wheel, man.
Yeah.
So how do you stand in the middle in a intentful way? How do you hear both ends? How do you empathize with both ends in an intentful way that doesn't perpetuate the woo, 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 woo?
I call
Because
that,
that's,
and Alan Watts would call it vicious circles, right? And um, what what's interesting is one of the things that came back to me is Michael Ende. He's a German writer. He's the one who wrote The Neverending Story, and he hated the movie just because it's just a very simplification of what he wrote. And if you read his book, it's very deep. You know, even though people say it's a children's story of fantasy, but it has very deep meanings and very symbolic, because he looked at all the folklore and realized that the folklore was spoken because each person, as it's being handed down, can add their own little influence to the story that's meaningful to them, in which they can pass down to the next generation, and they can change a little bit of the story where it's meaningful to them. So, you know, something that's written isn't dynamic anymore. You just read it from a page and it's the same however many years, however many iterations and editions, it's just going to remain the same. So, you know, something that was written 200, 300 years ago is going to really resonate with us because just so many things have changed. So therefore the folklore is great in that aspect because it can change subtly. You know, it's kind of like a telephone game, except it doesn't get worse, because people who want to tell the story, people who want to listen to it, it has to be better in some way. So you have to find a way to engage them. And so I think you know, there's a lot of meaning in that as well. And, you know, that could be a lot of the reasons for, you know, so many folklores and subtle differences across the world, different times, until we got to recorded history. And all of a sudden, all these folklores, all these handed down stories that don't have personal meanings, it's impersonal. And now we've got, you know, the idea of an impersonal God, deity, you know, types of things. So there's so much reflects on other things. It's just amazing when you think about it, but most people won't think about it because it's just overwhelming.
it should be personal. I think that's a really good point to make clear. Is it really should, these things should be personal. You know, these things shouldn't be alien to you. You know, you should come up with your own meanings.
Oh my
You know,
goodness. I was waiting for you to say that. That's exactly what I was thinking of. Symbolism. Create your own meaning for the symbolism. And what's funny is Adam Weishaupt said the exact same thing. And it's crazy how different people, different paths, different methods of investigation, like you were saying earlier, just you have those two different ideas, yet they come up with the same end result. And I think I'm more for that, where that's something like, you know, it feels like that the pub jokes. You know, you got a rabbi, a priest, and you know, one of those types of jokes, and it's funny because it resonates and all of that. But yeah, I just feel like, all right, so you definitely have a very social experiential approach, because from watching your videos, you're talking a lot about how you were with this shaman here, you're with this tribe over here, and really getting to talk with a lot of these spiritual leaders and practitioners. Whereas me is like, well, I just have to look at different points of view, look at different written accounts, and then eventually try something like ayahuasca, and then go into something more, just really pay attention to nature, look at any type of synchronicities, pay attention to my dreams, my own analysis, my own thoughts. Why am I certainly thinking of this, like Mako Andy and the never-ending story all of a sudden? Is there a particular reason I started to think of that? Or is it just random? Kind of like the idea of evolution and the very scientific approach, how everything is just random. But I don't think so. I don't think for a trillion years monkeys will end up writing Shakespeare. by accident.
I think one of a coin cliches to say here is there's more than one way to Mecca. There is, you have a way of your own, and that's what the Tao is, right? It's the way, whatever that means. So you have your own way of investigating what's going on here. And for you to say to someone else forcibly that you must do it this way, now we're talking about religion. Now we're talking about initiation ceremonies. Now we're talking about secret societies and all of their waves of the hand, right? This is how it's done. And for me, you know, I'm just a yes man, you know, like I want to, it's like, oh, we're doing some pagan, you know, whatever. All right, yeah. Oh, you know, we're doing a ceremony, a communion ceremony. All right, yeah, cool. You know, I'm just down. That's my way.
Yeah.
So for me to push that onto somebody else, though,
Yeah.
right? Like, yes, I am biased to it because it's brought me certain clarifications. It's brought me certain steps up Jacob's ladder, so to speak. But you know, everybody has, some people might start off in a very like cultic kind of circle, you know, and then they'll break out of it, you know, and they'll find what they need in like Buddhism or something, you know, and that's cool. That's cool, you know, or somebody might need to jump into an institution in order for them to work down that path. That's cool. And it's just it's that allowance of their own seeking, and that it takes on many different roads. It takes on many different flavors. And really all you can do is you can observe others and learn from them, impartial, you know, grains of salt. But ultimately, you're looking at all these things to go about your own way. What works for you, what doesn't, you know? How do you seek divinity? How do you seek an understanding of the world? You know, and how do you not instigate?
Oh. All right, there you go. Yeah, sometimes you freeze like every like 5 minutes for like 3 seconds just to sync up the internet. But that's fine. Oh, could you repeat the last thing? Because
Why would you need to instigate your thoughts onto others unless you are very insecure about your own?
Yeah, very very good. Well put. I mean, it feels just so simple when we break it down. It just seems so simple. But I think, yeah, all these institutions, religions, ceremonies, they made it more complicated, and and I think we're trying to get back to a point. It's like we could go into uh, a Baptist church or Catholic communion, listen to a sermon, find our own meanings to. I mean, that's why there's so many denominations of the Christian religion, and that's what people do, and that's a good thing. But then they'll only keep it within that structure, right? They won't look into Taoism. They go, oh my goodness, there's a lot of stuff that Christians kind of have
only here, only
yeah, only,
here.
Yeah.
This is the way.
Yeah. It's just great. It's great. That's why I love talking to different people, and they all have all these different paths. Because I could just listen to somebody, and go, I understand this person. I have no idea who this person is, how we got to this point, but just by listening to this person, I understand this person because I just somehow understand, just because the same experience lines up. It's like we have no interaction with each other, but it's like, okay, so how did he get? I'm curious to see how you got to that point, and you might be curious to see how I got to that point. And other people probably are just thinking, yeah, you two are crazy. Or they're going, oh, wait, these two people understand. So, I would love to talk with them, but we don't really see that much interaction yet. I think it'll get there. But, that's just trying to remain hopeful. And I'm more hopeful, I think, than you are, definitely. But
I would stick out a little bit and say that I think given a good amount of time, these things will, we're seeing a dissolve contemporarily speaking, of certain structures and modalities of thinking that is causing agitations. And ultimately, with the continual dissolve, if we're going to assume that there is a continual dissolve, that it will ultimately lead to a state of
Parody?
bare essentials. Bare essentials. I mean, like bedrock, you know? And then from there, you have two options: defeat or curiosity, you know? Which we're seeing a lot of defeat right now. And I think that's the early phase. But ultimately, it will lead to curiosity. And then there's going to be plenty of people ahead of time, you know? But I would say, you know, scratch any cynic deep enough, you find an idealist, you know? While it's like my gig to pick at things a bit, fundamentally, I am idealistic. If allowed a world that was that way, I would have nothing to talk about.
Yeah. And I think that's probably it as well, just because when you're in a circle and you're told the same thing, you like, what do you talk about? You talk about, oh, remember that verse? Oh, I just love that verse. I mean, just think about it. It's like you're not thinking outwardly or inwardly. You're just it's just like a memorization. It's like what you learned at school. It's like, what happened in 1776 on July 2nd, and what happened July 4th, and what happened what's happening in France during their revolution in 1778. And it's like all of that stuff, just we don't really, some of us might care and we'll just remember it, but like, what's the meaning behind it? What's the excitement? What was why was everyone up in arms? Why was everyone fighting each other, killing people, sacrificing their just freedom, or their rights, or all of this stuff? And some people, like, they'll say it's just, they just don't want to be taxed. That was all it was. They just didn't want to be taxed. And of course we're still taxed by anyways. It's
my bias is, no matter what the topic, who I want to spend my time with, am I hearing something novel? Am I hearing a original opinion? Now, I understand nothing's really that original, but there's several instigative questions, like, great to ruin a party, but you could, ask somebody, what do you think will happen when you die? And based on that response, if they give you a regurgitation of a long trotted tradition, then immediately you can ascertain there's no novelty here. They're not questioning the grain. Cool. But ultimately, the company that I'm interested in, what I want to hear is novelty, something that I've never heard before. It shows that the person is investigating. It shows that they're looking into things. They're stitching their own mosaic. They're not getting their programming from somewhere else. They're making their own. And that shows an innovativeness, that shows that they're beyond a certain level, and that's what we need. We need originality. We need fresh air. We need novelty. We're drowning in the isms of the past. What about any new isms? They haven't made a new ism for like 100 years. Come on, get on it. Yeah. People have lost it. So we need this regurgitation is really the issue. And that's the imitation, and that's the abstraction that we were talking about at the beginning.
And I see this reflected in just whether you want to call it culture or society. Just look at entertainment, whether it's from Hollywood or just individually. It's almost it's so bad. I mean, you talk about tropes all the time within religion and spirituality and stuff like that. I mean, there's many more tropes within TVs.
Yeah, beating a dead horse, man. Just beating it and beating it. Yeah.
So yeah, originality, art, and it seems like almost every spiritual, philosophical type of openness is always about the importance of creativity. It always seems to boil down to just, we want to be amazed. We want to be um, curious, remain curious. It's like, once I mean, could you imagine living forever? And what would you do if you lived forever? I think some of us would just get tired, just bored, looking for something new. And then the problem with that is uh, you might become more sadistic because you want to try something new, but it just has to get worse in order to get that new experience. And then almost you're at that point where everything is just you're just dead inside, right? Because it's
Mhm.
like, what do I do now? Do I just kill a million people to see how it feels? How about that? Let's do that. And it's like, it was okay for a while. I don't feel so good. What's next? Um,
What makes life meaningful in that way, and what any of us are fundamentally seeking, is a state of wonderment, to be mystified, to feel humbled by the beauty of things, and to be in awe. That's what is ultimately wanted, and how to solicit that. There have been times where this is the way it works, and then it didn't work anymore, and then so they came up with a new way, right?
mhm.
And so that's the inheritance of humankind, is to come up with a new way of seeking awe, of seeking wonderment. um,
Harkens me back to the beginning, how you say some words just kind of lose their meaning. Just think of awful. You're full of awe,
yeah,
yet that's
awful.
a horrible. It's a bad term. How are you doing? Oh, it's just awful. It's like,
A little too much awe is destroying ego. And that's not good. um yeah. I try to resist many words because of that. I try to resist using the word faith because of what people have done with that word, not what I think of it,
mhm.
which is very different. Or the word grace, that's another one that's been.
I,
Yeah, it
I
looks like you
want
have
to. I
something
want
to
to
say.
know. Yeah, because I have a different meaning for faith and for grace as well. I just I feel free to go into those two. Your
Well, I think that faith has been generally nowadays understood to be a type of complicitness, where somebody is ignorant truly, and they are actually just using faith as a justification, usually associated with the ignoramuses of Christianity. However, in my mind, a certain degree of faith is like um, an accumulation of small little experiences in your life that hint at something. And so you attempt to stitch them together. And you understand that this level of understanding doesn't have a concrete basis. It's a very low density realm of understanding. And so in that attempt, you stitch things together in faith, not out of nothingness per se, but out of a kind of like trust of the thing. Because a lot of what we believe is baseless. Base to these things. We think there are, but in truth, there's not. And so, in that way, faith plays a crucial role. I'm not saying that one, I'm not aligning with Christianity in any sort of way. However, grace, I think of the drunken master, of like Zen Buddhism and whatnot, where their everyday life, there is a type of majesticness to what they do. There is a moving beauty to them that is always in the now. It is not caught up in what is or what will be, what was. It is very conscious and present, and subsequently beautiful, and is there. And when I say present, I mean they're there. They're here to hear you, to feel with you, to give empathy. And that is a type of grace, miraculousness, openness to the synchronicities, whatever is unfolding to them, which is like a nirvana type of, enlightened state of being that can only be achieved by somebody I want to talk to. So that's how I understand grace, which I think is a great word that has been pummeled.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And what's interesting is Adam Weishaupt. One of his quotes is "G is for grace." I think he was referring to the G in the Freemasonic symbol. Is what the G stands for. Everyone always asks. And for me, faith, which again, it's just one of those terms that it doesn't sync up with other people who use the term faith, because it's like, what's the difference between faith and religion? I would say religion is clinging on to something and not letting go, whereas faith is letting go rather than clinging on. And, it's just like think of it as if my kids are gonna go to school, and I let them choose their own way, and I'll believe they'll find their way no matter what. That's just like I'm clinging on to that
Trust.
idea.
You trust the greater function.
But you don't want to let them do it because so many things can happen. Faith, on the other hand, is like you just have to trust things as they are and just let go and realize, that you've done everything you can to you've taught them what to do in certain situations. You taught them, where the direction is, what to do when they're lost or don't know where to go. And, if they don't, if they're not there by a certain time, you'll get a call and then just like stay right where you are type of thing. So you're clinging on, and all of a sudden you just let go. And then the next day it's like, well, you don't have to believe anymore that, something bad is going to happen. It's just most likely
actually very healthy for you to let go, right? Because then you're fixating, and then you're full of aggression, and you're trying to exercise power over things that you don't have power over.
You don't have control over, exactly.
And all of this, I can't remember what tradition it is. Maybe it's a philosophical tradition where it's like the trials of life are preparation for death, in the sense that, the ultimate test that we'll all go through is the act of letting go and trusting the thing, whatever it is. And that is at the edge of life itself. Do you go kicking and screaming, or do you let go? Do you trust it, whatever it is, And that's a very, that's a good way of scratching away at people, in a very fundamental way. Do you trust the thing, whatever the thing is? We don't have to define it. We don't have to make books about it. We can just, whatever it is it trustworthy? Are you okay? Are you okay?
It's not being a parent. Are you a parent at all, or are you still not?
No.
Okay.
No.
So
I have all the respect in the world for parents, but no, I'm not.
Yeah. Because I always think of like if I'm going for the conspiracy theory, I always wonder, because I see so many kids and parents just differ on things. Like if you raise them a certain way, especially if you like a strict way of doing things, they usually, when they grow up, really rebel and do the opposite. So I don't see how, with this conspiracy theorists of like a certain family always, through their bloodlines being like adhering to that same idea throughout the ages and not ever like, I find that difficult. But also the idea of parenting for me is, I would love for my kids to just be ready for whatever's coming at them and make their decisions. They may become like government agents, which I won't like, very controlling, domineering, and whatever, and like very religious in a sense, very opposite of me. But I'm like, I gotta let them go their own way and see where it goes for them. just support them however way I can, subtly. I can't force them. Otherwise, they'll just dig in their heels. So, in a sense, we can also apply that to whatever deity source that we may have. Like if you're very religious, you're gonna be like act like that same like being, right? It always seems to reflect our personalities, what we believe in some deity. And
Yeah.
then, but I always see it as same thing. The deity is like, go your own way, do figure things out. But if you need me, I'm there. You may not realize it, but but the more I force something on you, the more you're gonna be,
Yeah.
digging in. So,
And a philosophy of radical honesty and tough love would be necessitated in that.
mhm.
You see an interest in them, and so you facilitate that interest, and you inform, but you don't dictate, right? And in the other sphere of things, it's the classic as above, so below. If the family structure has a big papa that's very domineering, very patriarchal, that's what they're going to expect from the greater conduits of the universe, from their government, yada, 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 right? The family structure mirrors the cosmological and every step in between, right?
Yeah.
So it's what you're talking about. Letting them do what they do. Yeah, that's another aspect of letting go. The deity, if we want to call it that, is truly intelligent.
Yeah.
Then that would be the way.
Yeah. All right. I would love to keep talking, but it's
No,
been
we've gone
hour,
way over time.
Yeah, an hour 22 minutes. I don't want to take any of your time. I think we may come back to have a conversation based on different findings, and just sometimes it's just like I'm just watching your videos. I'm watching someone else's videos, and it's like something that you say. It's like, I need to talk to you about that because I've been looking into that type of thing. And that's just it's like, how do I know if I'm, it's like I want someone to, like, I know you say you're a yes man, but in certain degrees I'm always a no. I'm looking for people to just say no, 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 you're wrong, Ebon, you're totally wrong, and here's why. And then I want to listen to them, see if it sounds logical or reasonable, if there's something backing it. And then I just want to rethink my position. But then if I find it's just the same position as, like you said, regurgitation, authority type of thing, it's like, well, I'm back to square one. I know, at least I went there, right? At least I checked it out. I know, like, it's like what's that game where you flip cards over one at a time? Memory. It's like, I already flipped that one over, and I flipped it over again, so I'm definitely sure it's not gonna match up with this. So that's where I'm at with that in regards to that. So
Whenever the time is appropriate, I'm happy to.
All right, thank you. Thank you for joining me. Hope you have a good rest of your holy days, if you have holy days, and New Year. All right, thank you, and everyone else.
Nice.
Same with you. All right.